Hello, good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock, and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar. I'm Matt Homers with Iowa State University and ISU Extension and Outreach, and faculty collaborator with Iowa Learning Farms. Excited to be here today. And Iowa Learning Farms is a partnership of the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, Iowa DNR, through the Section 319 program, USDA NRCS, and ISU Extension and Outreach. So Iowa Learning Farms is glad to be able to help host these webinars and facilitate dialogue on conservation. So we are really fortunate today to have Dr. Wenjuan Huang from uh, the EEOB department, Ecology, Evolution, and Organismal Biology. I can still test myself if I can remember the EEOB department. She's going to talk to us today about hidden carbon credits, reducing soil organic carbon erosion with cover crops. So certainly a super important topic in cover crops. We heard some from Alejandro Plastina last week about adoption and disadoption of cover crops. And I think understanding what some of the impacts are of cover crops as we think about erosion are super critical. With that, Wenjuan, the virtual floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for your nice introduction. Yeah, so today I will be presenting my recent work that was published in the Journal of Global Change Biology. This paper forms the basis of the talk today and highlight some important findings related to cover crop impacts on soil carbon storage. So this is a collaborative work involving scientists from several universities, including Iowa State University, Cornell University, and the University of New Hampshire. I'd like to give special thanks to Dr. Yiqi Luo, who is my postdoc advisor at the Cornell University. While I joined his lab, this idea came up during one of our conversations, which eventually led to these publications under his support. And many of you may have known that cover crop growing plants between cash crop season to cover soil can provide a wide range of ecosystem benefits in agricultural cropping system. One of the most important benefits is to reduce soil erosion, especially during the non-growing season. Other important benefits include improving soil health, like improving soil organic matter, suppressing weeds through ground coverage, and promoting water quality by reducing nutrient runoff. And of course, many other benefits depending on management practices. So among different agriculture management practices, cover crop has been considered as one of the most promising strategies to increase soil organic matter. This is largely because during the period when cash crops are not growing, cover crop allowed to provide year-round plant carbon inputs to the soil, both through above-ground biomass and below-ground root systems. However, the benefits from adopting cover crops on SOC remain uncertain and contentious. For example, the widely held assumption is that cover crop can increase soil organic carbon levels. However, a recent publication changed this assumption and argued that cover crops may not increase SOC stock as much as we have claimed before. In response, another scientist wrote a commentary to refute this claim, highlighting the importance of cover crop in increasing SOC stock. So SOC gain under cover crops remain a topic of ongoing debate. So to understand this uncertainty, let's take a step back to revisit a simple but very insightful way to think about SOC dynamics as a box model. SOC storage is the balance between plant carbon inputs and soil carbon outputs. To increase SOC storage, we can manage our agricultural systems by increasing plant carbon inputs and decrease soil carbon outputs. When we talk about the cover crop effects on soil carbon, we often focus on their benefits to provide additional plant carbon inputs to the soil. As a result, it commonly assume that the use of cover crop can help increase SOC stock. However, what is often overlooked is the output side of this box. Although cover crop can provide more plant carbon inputs, they can also influence carbon losses through the processes such as microbial decomposition and soil erosion. For example, increased plant carbon inputs may fuel microbial activity and increase carbon decomposition as CO2, which can offset any potential positive effects of additional plant carbon inputs. Also, if cover crops have a big impact on soil erosion, then the difference in SOC under cover crop versus no cover crop that we are seeing maybe not completely contributed by the additional plant carbon inputs. So without considering these output processes, there's a tendency to overestimate how much plant carbon inputs contribute to SOC sequestration. To demonstrate the importance of output processes, I would like to share another recent study, even though I have presented these results at this webinar last November. The photo that you see here is from a long-term Marsden farm cropping system experiment, which was established in 2002, previously led by Dr. Matt Liebman and now by Dr. Marshall McDaniel. These experiments include diversified cropping systems, expanding the conventional 2-year corn and soybean rotations to 3- and 4-year extended rotations that incorporate small grain and alfalfa. These diversified cropping systems of 3-year and 4-year rotations have relative higher plant carbon inputs than we would expect that the 3-year and 4-year rotation have relative higher SOC storage relative to the 2-year rotation. However, after a 20-year experiment, we took soil sample from 1 meter soil depth and measured SOC. We did not see any increases in SOC with the 1 meter soil profile in the 3-year and 4-year rotation relative to the 2-year rotation. And we also found that the 3-year and 4-year rotations also had higher carbon decompositions than the 2-year rotation. So the increased carbon decompositions may have offset the increased plant carbon inputs and help explain such no net change in SOC storage. Now, turning back to the cover crop, we know the cover crop induces additional plant carbon inputs. Relative to the conventional cropping systems, the assumption is that more plant carbon inputs, more SOC storage. However, the relationship is not always straightforward. I will show you some of my preliminary data on this. The photo is another long-term experiment, comparison of biofuel cropping system, established in 2008, mainly led by Dr. Michael Thompson and Dr. Matt Helmers. In this experiment, there are total 6 different management treatments. Among them, there are cover crop and no cover crop in the continuous corn cropping systems. So let's just focus on these 2 treatments. After 14 years experiment, we took soil samples to measure SOC stock and observed that cover crop did not increase SOC stock in the top soil at 0 to 30 centimeters. Even more surprising, when we look deeper down to the 1 meter, we found a significant decrease in SOC stock compared to the control without cover crop. So cover crop can provide additional plant carbon inputs, but it didn't necessarily increase SOC storage. Then based on this data that I have shown you, you may question, then where are the carbon credits from adopting cover crops? Or are the carbon credits from cover crops really as much as we thought before? So to answer these questions, we need to consider another important output process, carbon loss through soil erosion, another hidden carbon credit, carbon benefits from reducing soil erosion. Let's go back to the soil box model. We've heavily focused on the plant carbon inputs, talk about the carbon decomposition output. But besides those, another critical carbon output process is carbon loss through soil erosion, which is often ignored. Reducing soil erosion is one of the primary motivations for farmers to adopt cover crops. Cover crops have been widely recognized for their effectiveness in reducing soil erosion. For example, a recent meta-analysis study has shown that cover crop can reduce soil erosion by about 90% on average across the global scale. Besides the input carbon credit, cover crop-induced reduction in carbon loss through soil erosion may deserve attention as additional carbon credit, as they can effectively reduce soil erosion. So let's take a close look at how soil erosion affects soil carbon. In many cases, the control plot without cover crop experiencing more soil erosion. This means the topsoil, which is usually rich in SOC, gets washed away over time. Then what is left behind? The deep soil layer, which is naturally contain relatively lower SOC. So one compare SOC between the control and the cover crop by the fixed step method. There's no longer be an apples to apples comparison. Part of that difference might just because the control plot have lost their topsoil. Higher SOC under the cover crop may not be entirely due to the increased plant carbon input. It could be largely due to the reduced carbon loss through the erosion. So if that's the case, the impact from additional plant carbon inputs on SOC may be overestimated. Carbon loss through erosion may have been playing an important role in leading to the observed SOC difference between the control and cover crop. This is why it is important to understand how much cover crop can reduce carbon loss through soil erosions. However, we still lack a quantitative assessment of this impact. So here we aim to quantitatively assess the extent to which cover crop can reduce carbon loss through soil erosion, hereafter termed SOC erosion reduction. To achieve this, we conduct a meta-analysis combining data from existing publications. This allowed us to generate a robust data-driven estimate of the magnitude of SOC erosion reduction under cover crops across different environments. Second, since many studies on cover crop were conducted under specific climate, soil, geographic, and agronomic conditions, we would like to synthesize them and develop a more generalizable framework to provide insight into effective cover crop management. So we need to identify the key factors for SOC erosion reduction under cover crops, and we use the boosted regression tree analysis to identify the importance of the influencing factors. Finally, if we want to move beyond just how much and ask where, our another objective was to identify the hotspots for SOC erosion reduction under cover crops. So we use a machine learning method to generate a global distributions of the effect size of SOC erosion reduction under cover crops. So in total, we collect 152 experiments that study the effects cover crop on carbon loss through erosion. Compared to other meta-analysis studies on cover crop, our data set is relatively small. This is because relatively few studies have simultaneously assessed soil erosion or carbon loss through erosion when they study cover crop impacts on soil carbon. So this map shows the location of this experiment. The red point indicates the decreased SOC erosion under cover crop relative to the control, while the blue point indicates the increased SOC erosion. Globally, 95% of these experiments show a decrease in SOC erosion under cover crop relative to the control, and only a few experiments show an increase in SOC erosion under cover crops. And such increase was very small, likely due to the sampling variabilities or sampling errors. And we calculate the effect size of SOC erosion reduction under cover crops relative to the control, and also compare them with SOC stock change using the same collected data set. For SOC erosion, the effect size is the percentage reduction in carbon loss through soil erosion under cover crop relative to the control. For SOC, the effect size is the percentage increase in SOC stock under cover crop relative to the control. So the point on the right side of the zero dash line indicates the reduction in carbon loss through erosion under cover crop or increase in SOC stock under cover crop. The red point indicates SOC erosion and the gray point indicates the SOC stock. So the point size indicates the sample size. Overall, we found the cover crop can significantly and consistently decrease carbon loss through erosion and increase SOC stock. The effect size of SOC erosion reduction was consistently much higher than SOC stock increase. Specifically, cover crops reduce SOC erosion by about 68% on average, while it increased SOC stock by an average of 14%. So these results emphasize the strong effectiveness of cover crop on preventing carbon loss through reducing soil erosion. Let's focus on the red points, SOC erosion. When separating the data set into different groups, the results show that the effect size of SOC erosion reduction under cover crop did not vary with climate-related variables, but it varied with the topographic conditions like the slope and some management practice like the cover crop types and experiment duration. For example, the magnitude of SOC erosion reduction significantly increased with the steeper slope from an average reduction of 45% at the level side to 65% at the sloping side and up to 80% at the steep side. When separating the data into the legume versus non-legume, we found the non-legume cover crop had a significantly higher effect size of SOC erosion reduction than the legume, about 80% for the non-legume and about 60% for the legume. We also found the longer experimental duration also significantly increased effect size of SOC erosion reduction, reaching average of 80% in the experiment lasting for more than 5 years. So together, this means if we adopt no legume cover crops in the area with steeper slope for more than 5 years, it can help reduce carbon loss through soil erosion by more than 70%. Next, we identify the most important climate, topographic, and soil geochemical factors, as well as management practice in regulating SOC erosion, and compare these driving factors with those of SOC stock change. So the higher relative influence percentage, the more important these variables. So we found the topographic, particularly the slope, explained a large percentage of the variations in the effective size of SOC erosion. And the great SOC erosion reduction tend to occur at the site with steeper slope, consistent with the result shown in the previous slide. This is also consistent with the notion that the slope is the main driver for soil erosion. On the other hand, the variation in the effect size of SOC stock was mainly regulated by the climate, mean annual temperature, and mean annual precipitation. The importance of climate in our study may be as a result of its close relationship with plant productivity, as previous study has also shown the importance of the cover crop biomass in determining SOC change. So the effect size of SOC erosion reduction and SOC stock change had quite different predictors. This implies these two processes are independent and highlighting the importance of considering carbon loss through soil erosion when studying cover crop impacts on SOC storage, particularly in the sloping areas. So given the consistent and significant SOC erosion reduction under cover crop, then you might ask, how it explain the lack of SOC stock increase or even a decrease in SOC stock, as shown by our preliminary data? The result of decreased SOC suggests that besides the direct impact of reduced SOC erosion, other mechanisms may have contributed to the lower SOC. For example, the fresh carbon or root inputs may stimulate microbial activities and accelerate soil organic matter decompositions for microbial nutrient demand. So additional plant carbon input from cover crops may not contribute to carbon credit, but cover crop may have been reducing carbon loss through erosion. This further emphasizes the importance of recognizing this carbon credit from soil erosion reduction. By integrating the knowledge of SOC erosion reduction with above-mentioned factors, we further generate the global distribution of the effect size of SOC erosion reduction. If we apply the cover crop at a global cropland, for this global prediction, we meant the scenario of planting cover crops with legume and non-legume mixture, no tillage, and for 2.5 years. So this global map resolution is at a 0.25 degree. A darker blue indicates a higher effect size. Overall, the estimated effect size of SOC erosion reduction in the global cropland average 25%, ranging from 0 to 89%. This map also pinpoints the region where cover crop adoption is most effective in retaining soil carbon. Specifically, the Central Europe, Central East China, and Southern South America show relative higher effect size of SOC erosion reduction, greater than 70%. So this was mainly associated with their relative steeper slope in the cropland. And we also looked their special pattern of the effect size across the latitude. So over cropland, the temperate region tend to have higher effect size of SOC erosion reduction. This may be because the soil in the temperate region were more vulnerable to erosion due to a coarse texture of lower aggregation capacity than the tropical soil. And we also compare the region with the steeper versus gentle slope. For example, the Central East China with the steeper slope versus the Central US with the gentle slope. Similar, the darker the blue, the larger the effect size. So we found the effect size in the Central East China average at about 47%, while it averaged 20% in the Central US. And in Alva, so with the outline region here, cover crop can also have significant impact on SOC erosion, in some cases up to 70%. Let's look at some numbers and do a simple calculations by comparing our results with other studies. So in our study, we found the cover crop induced SOC erosion reduction rate is at 0.04 megagram carbon per hectare per year. If we applied cover crop to the global cropland at about 1.9 billion hectares, the total SOC reduction rate under cover crop would be at 0.075 petagram carbon per year by using the SOC erosion reduction rate found in our study. So previous study estimate carbon loss through erosion at 0.36 petagram carbon per year across the global cropland. So if we plant cover crop it can result in about a 21% reduction in carbon loss through erosion. This is consistent with our global prediction of SOC erosion reduction by the machine learning method, as I mentioned above, which is about 25% on average. So beyond the least carbon credit, reduce the topsoil erosion under cover crops can also help bring many other ecosystem benefits, such as enhance soil water holding capacity and retain soil nutrients. So together, all these insights highlight the critical role of cover crop in reducing carbon loss through erosion, improving soil health, and contributing to sustainable agriculture. In the end, some take-home points. Our results show that SOC erosion reduction by cover crops was widespread. Variation in effect size of SOC erosion reduction under cover crop were primarily related to topographic features like the slope. And these driving factors differ from those for SOC stock change. So these different driving factors also indicate that SOC erosion reduction is an independent and additive process relative to the plant carbon inputs. So for future work, we need long-term experiment by considering the combined effects of SOC erosion reduction on carbon sequestration at different spatial scales, and also looking for more powerful tools like carbon isotope to separate carbon loss through erosion from additional plant carbon inputs from the cover crop, which this could help us improve the regional estimation of SOC sequestration potential and the actual impact of cover crop on agricultural sustainability. So with that, I'd like to thank my co-authors in this paper and also the funding agencies that support this work. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks. We will have time for questions. That was super informative. So, and if you need a CCA CEU, please email, Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Again, Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu. Let's go to the next slide. We can. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can scan that QR code and go there to do that. Only one survey response is needed for all 2025 webinars. So if you've done one already, thank you very much. And if you're willing to do so, we'd greatly appreciate that as well. Let's put in a plug for the next webinar. Next week, we have Roland Wilhelm, assistant professor in the Department of Agronomy at Purdue University, on soil microbiome and biological testing. Where are we now and where are we going? So another important topic. And then one last slide. If you watch this webinar and want to go back and rewatch it, you can do that. Webinars are all archived. iowalearningfarms.org/webinars or YouTube. We have a channel there. So please forward, if somebody that might have interest in this, please forward that to them. Okay, we did get some questions. Maybe first start with, because there are a couple along this same line, is that some of that carbon that may be lost with the soil might be displaced, but perhaps maybe not lost from the field. I guess, previous work showed that eroded soil organic carbon isn't necessarily lost, as it can be stabilized in other areas. Can you comment on this and the implications for your work?
Yeah, thank you for this is a wonderful question. Actually, also raised by our review. Actually, there's previous studies. If we just focus on at the regional scale or product scale, even though there's the carbon can lost by the soil erosion, there's a dynamic carbon replacement. But actually, the previous study also found at the plot original scale, if there's carbon loss through erosion, we did observe the net carbon loss.
Okay,
Actually.
a net carbon, even if okay.
So it's
Yeah,
it will be probably the spatial scale matters.
okay. Might wind erosion be a factor that could be reduced by cover crops?
Yeah, that is another wonderful question. So unfortunately, due to the limited studies, they only focus on the carbon erosion through the runoff or through the water processes. We didn't collect the data to see how carbon loss through the wind erosion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. It I'm not sure of any data out there, but
Yeah. So
definitely would be useful. Yep. There's okay, another one here, and we should have time for a few more if people have it. Are there any studies comparing cover crops to perennial living cover?
living cover. So you mean a different cover
Yeah,
crop?
I think they may be thinking of something like the uh, perennial ground cover that where they're looking at maybe you know, Kentucky bluegrass, pole babosa, or Cura clover might be another one, a legume that would be a perennial that we would just plant our row crops in there, so it wouldn't be annual, it'd be more in there more permanently.
Yeah, I think there might be some difference, but unfortunately, in
Oh,
my study, we didn't look. We only focus on the cover crops. So,
okay.
and we also in kind of interesting finding when we separate cover crop type into legume and no legume, they have quite different effects on the SOC erosion reduction and also on the SOC stock change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually, I was misinterpreting that because they're looking at perennial living cover as managed grazing and permanent hay. So, are there studies comparing, I guess, row crops to cover crops to perennial system?
Mm. So I didn't separate. I didn't go to such detail. So I just simply separate
Yeah,
the cover crop type
yeah,
into the knowledge and but that
okay,
definitely an interesting study.
yeah. I guess I'd offer up that we have some plots where we've had corn, soybean with winter share rye cover crop, and then adjacent forage plots that have been in place since at least 15 years. So,
Okay.
yeah. Um, yeah, here's a good one. Can you explain why the legume and non-legume cover crops may have different effects?
Yeah, that's a good questions. At first, when I look the such difference, it seems like it didn't make sense to me. But actually, they do have the research from that. The reason why the no-legume has a higher impact on reducing carbon erosion. This is because usually the non-legume they have kind of more developing more rooting systems, probably can hold the soils more tight. So that's why can prevent the soil erosion more strongly. Yeah, and we do have the previous the study to support this argument. Yeah.
So here, does the saved carbon due to the cover crops are offset carbon release due to planting and terminating of the cover crop?
Matt, could you say that question again?
Yeah, I think this one's getting at, so does that saved carbon due to the cover crop that we're saving with erosion,
Uh-huh.
does it offset the carbon that might be released due to uh, planting and destroying of the cover crop? I think they're referring to the fuel that would be used to do those two things.
Uh,
And I'm not sure your study got at that, but that's kind of interesting that I think what they're saying is that we would use some carbon for fuel from the fuel for planting and destroying the cover crops, does that offset what we're gaining from the soil erosion benefit from a carbon perspective?
Yeah, I think that's totally possible. But they have challenge to separate the
Yeah.
carbon loss through erosion and versus the those carbon get destroyed or carbon loss through the decomposition processes. So I thought probably we need further research
Yeah.
for the more powerful tool like a carbon isotope may can help us to separate these processes.
Okay.
Yeah, very
All
good.
right. Yeah. All right. I think that gets at most of our questions. So, Wenjun, it was great to hear this and like you said, kind of a hidden aspect of cover crops, and certainly something to think about. And with that, again, if folks need a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today with your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, in your CCA number. And please tune in next week where we'll hear about the soil microbiome. With that, Wenjun, I'll give you any last comments.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
So this study actually our kind of first quantified the
Okay.
magnitude of SOC erosion reduction under cover crop, and our results definitely show a very strong effect of cover crop in protecting carbon from soil erosion. So that means so cover crop does not only provide more plant carbon inputs, and also it can be very strongly protect our soils to protect the carbon loss through soil erosions. So this is the carbon credit that we often overlook.
Yeah.
And of course, we need more research to try to have a more accurate or magnetic understanding of these carbon sequestration processes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.